Well, the streak had to end sometime, and the Giants fell in undramatic fashion 10-0 to the Padres in the finale of this 4-game series. But we can't take away the fact that they won 3 out of 4 from a team that was playing well, a team that was loaded with superstar talent after sweeping the Dodgers after winning 10 in a row. And so I'm going to discuss this with Javier Reyes from Locked On Padres to just talk about what's going on, why are the Padres underperforming, and why are people still sleeping on the San Francisco Giants?
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on the show, we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts, including YouTube. Check us out there. Hit that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by Bird Dogs. Go to birddogs.com/lockedonmlb, and they'll throw in a free custom Bird Dogs Yeti-style tumbler with every order. And coming up on today's show, it's a conversation with Javier Reyes from Locked On Padres. We discuss the series, a little bit about the finale, just to throw a bone to Javier Reyes about the, something positive for the Padres to take away from this. We preview the rest of the season and kind of how we see it playing out. Could 4 teams in the National League West end up making the playoffs? I think the answer is yes, that we could see that. And so much more. And particularly, I'm going to get fired up when we're talking about people underrating the Giants. Articles about how their players are going to be potentially available for other teams to acquire in trades at the trading deadline. Stuff like that. So without further delay, here is Javier Reyes and my conversation right now.
Because I'm being joined by the illustrious, the magnificent, longtime listeners know him. They know him in his gorgeous framed pictures in his background, the baseball plate with baseball signed inside. He's been on the pod a lot before. My good buddy, Ben Kaspick, host of Locked On Giants. Sir, how are you doing on this fine evening?
Well, I really wish we were here to talk about a 4-game sweep, but I guess that would be a little bit greedy. Giants would have been, on an 11-game winning streak, in the Padres. You're wearing the hat. I'm glad you're wearing the hat for those on YouTube. If you're not on YouTube, I highly recommend it just to see Javier's hat.
It's funny because I almost thought I might be able to get rid of it after the series. The Padres have been playing well. They win 2 out of 3 against the Rays. And in general, yeah, they've been a little bit hot and cold, but at least there were periods of hot when it comes to their offense where they would have some 8-run games. And yeah, they followed up with a 1, but at least it's oh, look, they're showing you the ceiling. And then what do they do in this series, Ben? They drive me insane. In fairness, the Giants are a very good team. I don't want to take anything away from them. I think we've been chatting for long enough, you and I, over the course of the years that I have no ill will towards the Giants. I think that they're a phenomenally well-structured team, which I also talked about if everybody wants to go check out. I chat with Mark DeLucci yesterday talking about the difference between the Giants building and the Padres. But, man, this series, it was a big one. And heading into it, the Padres trying to look to get hot, trying not to be the biggest disappointment, sans maybe the Mets in baseball this year. And they go out, and it's pretty rough. And that's probably what we're going to talk about the most. But first, I got to at least get in my happiness just a little bit. The only good thing is that the Padres managed to slightly delay the apocalypse from happening among Padres fans. They win the last game of the series on Thursday by a score of 10-0, and it was over pretty quick, to be quite honest with you. We get some home runs in this game from Ha-Seong Kim, Manny Machado, who quietly seems to finally be heating up, by the way, ever since he got back from the IL. So that's good because he was atrocious to start the season. If I'm not mistaken, who else we got from home runs in this game? Oh, and Gary Sanchez, Saint Gary, who had been on a really bad slump lately, but somehow already has. I think more home runs in these games he's played with the Padres than cumulative home runs for every Padres catcher for the past like 2 years.
Oh my
Probably not
God.
true, but it feels like
Sounds
it.
true.
It's
Yeah.
probably close because Nola probably has hit maybe like one or two, and then maybe you got a couple from, I don't know, Jorge Alfaro maybe. Like Alfaro might have had like 8 or something like that, but it's still embarrassingly close. But that's basically the story of the game. Manny Machado homers, Gary Sanchez homers, Nelson Cruz gets in on the action. He's been having a rough season. Ha-Seong Kim, even Jay Cronenworth, and they needed it.
Snell.
Because and then of course we got to talk about Snell, who was absolutely phenomenal yet again. 6 innings, no earned runs on just 3 hits, and no walks, which was huge. 11 strikeouts on 97 pitches. His ERA was at 5.04 at the end of May, and now it is a 3.22. Blake Snell never ceases to amaze me. He's an incredible interview, Ben. I don't know if you saw his like WRC Plus thing that kind of went viral a few weeks ago, which I thought was hilarious.
I think I did.
Very,
He was just like, "What is this?
Yeah,
what does it mean?"
I think the funniest
and they were
part,
like, "I can't tell you."
the funniest part for me was when he was like, "All right, I get, but why the plus?" You know, like I was like, I agree. I don't know why. Even I don't know why do we call it plus? Obviously, there are reasons behind it, but Snell on fire and used this changeup and generated 22 whiffs across all of his pitches. Every pitch was working, and again against a very good Giants lineup. So again, I mean that's literally all the positives for the Padres in this series, but it's at least something, and that's that Snell, who, for a team, by the way, that seemingly is interested in extending and trading and signing every single player in the league, Blake Snell, no rumors whatsoever, which is pretty weird, considering he's probably been the best overall pitcher on the team, absent Michael Wacha this season. But yeah, Ben, pretty cool stuff, at least for one game for the Padres.
Yeah, I mean, what I was going to add to that was that I thought actually the Padres starters in this series, like for the most part, did a really good job. Like it started with Michael Wacha, I think, in game 1.
Mm-hmm.
And then Seth Lugo was good, and Blake Snell was good, and Darvish wasn't bad himself. And so that's the thing. Like when I look at the Padres, and you look at their record and the disappointment that they've been good at kind of preventing runs on the whole. I think they're significantly better than the Giants at preventing runs, but the Giants have scored a lot more runs than the Padres, and that's what's kind of that's the crazy thing about baseball is that, like 99 out of 100, and I would be the 1 out of 100 with like blind optimism, would say coming into the year that the Padres offense is going to be at, like, if we were to say on June 22nd, which team has scored more runs, 99 out of 100 people would say the Padres. And it's not close. Giants have scored like 60 more runs than the Padres. And, when you look at that lineup, Tatis, Machado, Soto, Bogarts, Cronenworth, it kind of drops off after that. And we talked before the season, I had questions about the depth of the team. And if you have some injuries, and that kind of that second half of the lineup and all that. But then if you add in a guy like Machado not having a good year, and then Bogarts, I don't know what I've kind of read on Twitter stuff about he's kind of dealing with an injury or something, but he started off the year so hot, and now he's basically like overall been a league average hitter or close to it. And so, I mean, the Padres are a big story in the league this year for their underperformance, and that is why you're wearing the hat, and I really appreciate that. And the Giants, 2021 vibes a little bit, or maybe we're living somewhere between 2021 and 2022 right now, where they just came off a 10-game win streak. So yeah, the last game stunk from the Giants' perspective, but they also just swept the Dodgers right before this series, so it's not like they're just beating up on the bottom feeders of the league. These are two really good, on paper, the Padres teams that they just, Dodgers and Padres, they went 6-1. And so it's, these teams, I still, there's plenty of season left for the Padres, and their run differential is good. And they actually outscored the Giants in this series 19-15. So they just wasted they didn't spread it around right is all.
Yeah, I mean, that's for sure. And the Giants are 7th before this game in runs scored among all major league teams. The Padres, on the other hand, you already alluded to it, they are 22nd. So not great, Ben. Not great whatsoever. And this isn't just a simple, oh, they can't walk enough, they can't do this. I mean, runners in scoring position has kind of been it's still my pinned tweet on the Padres account, locked on, what was it? Left on Base Padres podcast. That's basically been the story for them. And that happens especially in game 3. And they've been rough this year. And I talked about this with Mark, just the difference in the two teams were the Giants. And I said this to you a few years ago too, where they just seem allergic to being like, we're not going to get any minus players. We haven't gotten our star yet. They tried this offseason, which we talked about before the season with Correa and Judge, but they just have all these Bs. I mean, if you just want to look at WRC plus, I know it's a stat both of us like, they have 10 guys with at least a WRC plus over 100, and then they've got your Brandon Crawfords, who are at least going to give you good defense, and then you have a Mitch Haniger who unfortunately got hurt. That's probably the only thing that hasn't gone the Giants' way, to be honest with you, this season. And for me, from my perspective, is the Giants. It's a little bit different than 2021 for me, because it doesn't feel like they're fermenting, if that's the right word, like random incredible seasons from old guys. I actually like the players they had heading into the year. I loved Michael Conforto, as you know. I thought that LaMonte Wade, he was like this platoon guy who had some health issues last year. I didn't realize he'd become budget Juan Soto, essentially. Like, that's basically what he is.
Really, you said that to me the other day. And if you look at the numbers, he is. I mean, he basically is currently. Juan Soto.
Yeah, 415 on base currently for him. Jock Peterson, another player I like. Bad defensively, he's going to hurt you there, but in the right matchups, he's really good. Yeah, exactly. He's really good, and his WRC plus right now is at 142. JD Davis, a little bit surprising, but only a little, because he was pretty good for the Mets. Mike Yastrzemski having a bounce back. Thairo Estrada, all these players that are just performing solid, right? They don't necessarily have their Tatis, who is probably the best overall player between both of these teams. And you would still probably take a lot of the Padres guys over the Giants players, but they just are solid fundamentally. Even Sean Manaea, I believe, has been turned into a decent reliever for the team, at least from when I last checked. I don't know if something.
He's been dominant out of the bullpen. He's been dominant. Okay, he's looked like he's striking out he's basically turned into Carlos Rodon. If you look at the kind of strikeout rate, he's just. I mean, will it last? I don't know, but he's become like a strikeout machine out of the bullpen and hasn't been walking people. And I mean, yeah, it's weird. Obviously, the Giants have a good track record with kind of getting the most out of pitchers. Yeah. And Sean Manaea, I mean, it's a stark contrast. He was on the pot. I know the numbers overall, if you look at just ERA for Manaea, they still don't look good. But yeah, I mean, he in the bullpen, he's just been kind of electric.
In a new role. Yeah, exactly. So
and then in a different kind of approach. He's like a power pitcher. With the Padres, he's kind of his velocity was in the low 90s, high 80s. Yeah. Now he's 96 up in the zone, just kind of different looking. They changed him.
Absolutely. They absolutely changed him. But before we continue talking about the rest of the series and the sadness overall from the Padres perspective, and then the happiness of the Giants, who I know you tweeted, are they not getting enough love? We're gonna let Ben cook for a little bit on that. But before we get into that, something that doesn't change, ladies and gentlemen, is our love here at the Locked On Padres podcast and Locked On Giants podcast and Locked On in general for FanDuel. It's great, guys. Baseball season is in full swing, obviously, and there's no better place to get on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Because right now, that's right, right now, as you are listening to this, new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's $1,000 up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. So just go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn to join today. So don't miss your chance to snag a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn to sign up. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. Go check it out. And we're back, everybody, here on the Locked On Padres, Locked On Giants crossover. I love doing the dramatic pause. It's one of my favorite parts of the show these days because my team stinks. But with my team stinking, that's what we got to talk about, because this division now, this is And I know this is a content creator thing to say. It's like, this was a big series, man. But it really felt like that because the Giants have that big winning streak going. They absolutely destroyed the Dodgers over the weekend. Let's be honest, they've kind of been doing that for the last like 15 years. But even still, like in this context, they killed them over the weekend. And the Padres had been slowly ramping up. So it was a big series. And I'm wondering, like, it's just, I don't know, like how, because I think I was talking with some friends of mine and everyone kind of universally agree. It's like the Giants, they built this team that was like, all right, they added a bunch of stuff and they said, okay, we have a better product overall. Like that we kind of ironed out some of the kinks with the team last year. You know, Brandon Belt is gone. Some guys like that, you know, Buster Posey retired before last year. And it just seems like they brought in some pros, right? They brought in Haniger. They brought in Manaea. They brought in my boy Conforto, right? So they've been solid in that regard. And JD Davis as well, who's been a stud. But I remember talking with a friend, like we probably 2.5 weeks ago, ish, probably just 2 weeks ago or something like that. The Giants are probably the team that everyone was looking at for being the trade deadline team, where this was the team that Alex Cobb, who I am not surprised at all, has been this good because, well, not that we debate this, but expected stats every now and then can be weird for the season. But they kicked in later. It was a delayed kick in, right? Alex Cobb really unlucky last year, and just with some really miserable Giants defense and all that, right? But this year he's been elite, and everyone's like, oh, that's going to be the guy at the deadline, or JD Davis, or Conforto. They signed Conforto so then they could trade him for prospects. Instead, they're probably going to be buyers at this rate, and it's probably going to go well for them, man. I mean, what is kind of the current state, I guess, of the Giants? Because I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but it really does feel like it has flip-flopped from being a solid baseball team. You can go watch them, get some Cracker Jack and a hot dog and have a good time, to, oh, yeah, we're like a good team, and we just whooped the Dodgers and Padres in back-to-back series.
Yeah, and I see that stuff, and kind of blending with what you were going to ask me later about the Giants not getting enough credit.
Here he goes.
All due respect to our fellow Locked On hosts, I've seen other Locked On channels kind of saying who their trade targets are, and they're talking about like Jock Peterson, and this is a team that the Locked On other host, their team is like,
go ahead now. Go ahead.
2 games under 500, and the Giants are 9 games over 500.
Woo!
What are you talking about? Why are you? How do you think you're getting Jock Peterson from the Giants? The Giants are going to take your players, not the other way around. And so I don't get it. The Giants get zero respect. People just don't know what's going on with them. They're not in a position where they're looking to sell, even if they were around 500. They're in a position where, like, people should come to me because I'll tell you like it is if you're confused, that this team has made the playoffs one time since 2016. And this front office is now in year 5, and they made the playoffs one time. And then following up on this historic 107 win season, they flopped to an 81-81 record, which is not that bad, but they got really hot in like September to get to even 81-81. And so there's pressure on the Giants to make the playoffs, and they are not a team that had any designs. I mean, you talk about Conforto, and they did not sign this guy to trade him. They signed him, like, the deal is similar to the Rodon deal, very similar, and they have the same agent, Scott Boras, with 2 years with an opt-out after the first. And I mean, even last year they had Rodon and they didn't trade him. And so this year, I think, like, clearly the intention was to be better than they were last year. This is a team that they literally had an agreement for $350 million for Carlos Correa. So I just don't understand when people think this team is a seller. And, like, how did they become a really good team? Well, I think they identify undervalued players really, really well. Like, you talk about Thairo Estrada and LaMonte Wade. Those guys are just legitimately good players, like really good. They deserve to go to the All-Star game. They've performed better than, Manny Machado. I know
Literally,
Machado's
yeah.
been bad, had a down year, but had a good last couple games. But overall, I mean, these guys have been better than Machado. So has JD Davis. And you talk about Davis, he always hit with the Mets and with the Astros. He's just always hit. If you look at his numbers, his issue was that he wasn't a good defender.
Mm-hmm.
And what the Giants did with him is helped him like tangibly improve his defense. And so they identify, not only do they identify undervalued targets like Yastrzemski and Thairo and Wade, these guys were acquired in extremely minor trades where they gave up either cash or like players who are now pitching in Korea, and they're performing at an all-star level for the Giants. And then you look at JD Davis. The Giants gave up Darren Ruff, and they got JD Davis and 3 prospects, and then they ended up back with Ruff a year later after the Mets cut him loose, and then the Giants cut him loose. So they're just out here fleecing. They're out here fleecing teams like the Mets. And then, you've got a player with a weakness like Davis, maybe defensively, and they tangibly helped him improve some things. And it shows up in the numbers. If you look at like defensive runs saved and just simply watching him play every day, he has been actually not just okay, but really good defensively. And so now you combine that with the fact that he always hit, it just kind of looks like they completely fleeced the Mets on that deal. And JD Davis has been an enormous part of their success. And then you look at, they're doing unorthodox things with their pitching staff. Right now they've got like 3 starters. They're doing bullpen games all the time. They did 2 wins at, I think 2 of the wins in the series. It was started by a reliever, an opener. And so anyway, I just think they always had designs on winning, and maybe 2022 was more of the fluky year than, 2021 maybe they were both fluky, 2021 and 2022
in opposite directions,
and that their actual talent is like kind of somewhere in the middle, and I think that's what we're seeing this year.
Mm-hmm. As I talked about with Mark on my podcast yesterday, not to keep touting my show, but we were like, his thing was, I think that Preller can learn from Zaidi in a lot of ways, because Preller has been good at, I think actually a little bit underrated at procuring a farm system that then you are able to use for stars. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, they got Jackson Merrill. They have this kid who's 16 years old, who's playing catcher and is debuting. So it's like, they have done good at that. The amount of trades has been my problem with the Padres. The how many of them at the same time, you know what I mean? Doing all of this for right now, instead of like, I don't have any issue with the Soto or Bogarts or Manny or whatever signings and Darvish and all that, but it's just like all of them right now feels a little bit like you're locking too much of your team in place. Well, the Giants, they could also, as Mark thought, like they could learn a little bit from trying to get more of the superstars. And he thinks, as well as I do, that they were trying, like I think, with the Aaron Judge thing, with the Carlos Correa thing, which was obviously, I imagine you've talked about that on your show a lot, so I'm not going to rehash it too much, but it's just this is what they do. This is what they do. This is what the Giants do. And it's one of the reasons I've liked them, even as a Padres guy, even just as a general baseball fan, is that for any of my Marvel heads out there, they're kind of like the Guardians of the Galaxy of baseball. Just a bunch of misfits that come together, but you better not underestimate them, because they will beat people that you probably don't expect them to beat. They've been doing it with the Dodgers for a decade. They've been doing it with the Padres for, I'm going to just assume, a century, and everybody else for a long time, right? Like, this is just what they do. And I'm really curious to see what happens for them going forward, because their team is just sound in every aspect. They've got an elite closer. They're making Manaea a lot better in this new role for them. You have Logan Webb, you have Alex Cobb, and then you have all the offensive players we just talked about. It's a good ball club in a lot of ways. The Padres, my big thing for them has been starting pitching has been good. Bullpen has been great. Not in the series. And then their defense, whether you choose defensive runs saved, they're 8th in baseball. And if you're an outs above average guy, then they're 1st in baseball. Like, they have the stuff there. It's just they can't drive people in. And I think that's what you saw. So it's hard for me to perfectly figure out what the problem with the Padres is, like in terms of right now, runners in scoring position, how Preller assembles a roster. But all I know for sure is that the Giants are doing the right things. And it just seems to work out for them. And I don't know, man. I think this is going to be a weird market, but the Giants might come in and be like, "Hey, let's go. Tim Anderson stinks right now. We're going to turn him into a good outfielder." So I'm exaggerating, but that's what the Giants do. They seem to be like, "Let's find the guys that we think can make better," while the Padres are like, "Let's find the guys that are great and just hope that they don't get worse," which is what it feels like for the Pods. And
Right.
hey, it's two totally different philosophies.
Yeah. And can I just add, like, the one thing that's going on with the Giants right now that you have not seen in a long time is that they've got some young guys showing up and contributing, and guys that are making, because even in 2021, like around here, people were still kind of like, this team is not exciting. People obviously got on board with the 107 win team, but
Yeah.
certainly last year it was just people were really antsy and kind of not happy with the product. And having young players come up and make a true impact is, first of all, it's what led to the championship era for the Giants. Like, if you look at how those teams were built, Posey and Lincecum and Kane and Bumgarner and Pablo Sandoval, like, these were all homegrown players. And you saw some of those guys in this series, like some new young players like Luis Matos,
Yeah.
who's the second youngest position player in the major leagues at 21 years old, and behind only Jordan Walker of the Cardinals. And then Patrick Bailey. Suddenly you're like, hey, if you're a Padres fan, who is this catcher? Where's Joey Bart? Well, Joey Bart wasn't performing well.
Yeah.
Patrick Bailey was a pick by this new regime in first round in 2020, and he's just showed up, and all he's done is impress, and he's been really, really good defensively. He threw out Tatis trying to steal third in game one in the first inning of the series, kind of set the tone. Tatis leadoff double, and then he gets thrown out for the first out trying to steal third by Patrick Bailey, who had just thrown out Mookie Betts at third in the ninth inning of a tie game with one out at Dodger Stadium. And so it's like big time the way this guy's performing, and he's hitting. He had 2 hits today, had 2 at bats, 2 hits. If you look up the numbers for Patrick Bailey, I mean, and I would imagine a lot of people haven't heard of him, but here he is on the Giants just contributing for the last month or so. And Matos is really exciting, and they've got other exciting prospects coming. And so that's a big part of what it kind of changed the vibe when these guys showed up, and not just showed up, but played well, because young players coming up and playing well energizes a team a lot. And that's happened this year with the Giants.
Yes, it has.
And
Yes,
the Padres kind of, I mean, Tatis was that, but
yeah,
after that, they kind of trade away all their prospects,
Yeah,
and so you haven't really had a chance.
it's been too much trades. Some would argue, and that's what my earlier point was, where it's like, yeah, I'm cool with the Soto trade, I'm cool with Bogarts, but am I cool with all of them? If I knew that the team was still down to spend money, do I want them still trading for Soto? If I knew we were trading for Soto, do I still want us to go out and get Xander Bogarts and then also extend Machado? It's a lot of questions, because the Giants are showing you that you can find other ways, and the Giants, they are missing that superstar, and I think that's probably, I would wager, the only reason people aren't talking about them, because the guys just aren't household names. They don't have a Posey. I would argue their most known player might be might be Michael Conforto, just because he was on the Mets. Maybe Logan Webb. A lot of the other guys are just a little bit unknown at the moment in terms of just popularity, but they're just as good as every other team's best players. And especially for an offseason that had such a crazy free agent class, with shortstops, with outfielders, with starting pitching. I talked about this on my show this week too. Yesterday's episode, just a pretty insane, just for big moves that happened this offseason for the biggest players. Like, barely anyone's performed. I mean, Xander Bogaerts has actually, compared to the rest of them, been pretty great. But like Trey Turner, I've made this joke before. He's Isaiah Kiner-Falefa now on the Phillies, which is insane. I'm not trying to be mean to the guy, but that's not what you expect from Trey Turner. Carlos Correa, he's been heating up lately, but he hasn't been very good.
No.
Aaron Judge, an exception. Jacob deGrom, the injury. Andres Jimenez and Manny Machado, 2 extensions that have not worked out for either team. I mean, it's across the board. It's across the board. Carlos Rodon hasn't even pitched yet for the Yankees.
It's crazy. It's truly insane.
Man. It's been one of those really flop free agent / including the extensions with Machado Jimenez, like a really crazy flop class, while the Giants are like, hey, we like JD Davis. We're cool. You know, we're good on that.
There's something to be said about flexibility. Like when you lock yourself into these massive deals, they better work out. Otherwise, there's a lot of like pressure on the players. There's kind of angst from the fans.
That's my thing. Particularly when you have so many of them too. It's not like the Padres only have Tatis for 14 years. Because then I'd be like, oh, yeah, I don't care. You know what I mean? I'd be like, all right, whatever. But they have like 6 of those guys, including Darvish, who will be pitching until he's 40. So that's like that makes it like, oh my God, there's no wiggle room. And I think that's the difference between these two teams, where the Giants, I mean, that I know, I imagine you've talked about on your show. I mean, everyone has to talk about it on their show, but are they a play for Shohei Ohtani this offseason? I mean, they didn't get their big fish with Judge and Correa. Maybe blessing in disguise. It ends up maybe they make a run for him. It's going to be interesting. But I know with this series with the Padres, a lot of people are going to look at it, deservedly so. They're going to say Snell was great, and then we got walked off 2 nights in a row. I don't even know if I messaged you just being sad. I don't know what, like I think I said I was going to jump into a nuclear reactor. And then we had the third game where wasn't a walk-off or anything like that, but instead, rather, the Padres, I believe they were like 1 of 8 with runners in scoring position, and Trent Grisham was the only one to drive someone in at one point, grounding.
That dude kills the Giants just every time, by the way.
So funny.
That guy just owns us.
This is why baseball's amazing. He's not even like,
I mean,
close to our best
his
player.
numbers are dreadful, but it's like nobody, if you ask any Giants fan, he's like the best player on the Padres.
It's insane.
Give him the $300 million.
Yeah, right. The walk-off against them in 2020.
At Oracle. He hit a walk-off homer against the Giants at Oracle Park. And ever since, that guy's just a villain.
Man. Absolutely. I don't know if Bob Melvin's in trouble. I don't know what's going to happen with this team. They've got Pittsburgh coming up. They've got the Nationals coming up. So maybe finally can they turn around? But as of right now, there's a reason I'm still wearing the hat. I do have to ask you, though, because we have in the show notes on the side, you think it's possible that this division has 4 playoff teams in it?
I think it's very possible. Mm-hmm. I mean, let's just be, let's just look at the numbers. Fangraphs puts up playoff odds, and right now you've got 4 teams in the West with playoff odds of 47% or more, and the Padres are the ones at 47%, and the Giants at 69%, the D-backs at 77%, and the Dodgers at 87%. So those are like, outside of the Braves, those are like the highest odds of anybody, and somebody's got to win the Central, but I don't think I don't think a second team probably makes it out of that Central. And then in the East, you've got, I mean, the Marlins are playing well, but if you look at the run differential, I look at run differential as well as record, especially in a 162 game season. We've got a lot of baseball left. Mm-hmm. And I was looking at the Padres' upcoming schedule, and it is, you just come off a 10-0 win, and now you go home and play the Nationals, and then you play the Pirates, you play the Reds, who I think are destined to cool off, and then the Angels and the Mets. But that little pocket there of Nationals, Pirates, Reds, I think you could maybe ride the momentum of the 10-0 win. I just think if you look at the talent of the Padres, the run differential of the Padres, which is plus 28, which has an expected record of 41-34, and the actual record is 36-39. I just think eventually that talent plays out. It's a better team than the Marlins, I think. For example, and so yeah,
I think
I mean, the Marlins are like 10 games over 500, so it's hard to at this stage they haven't been better, but.
If we have any Marlins fans watching, Padres didn't have the best run differential last year. They just hit really clutch and had good pitching. Sometimes it happens. Kim Ng for GM of the year with the Arias deal and all this stuff. Like it's
hard to keep it up.
Preller gets just thrown to the piranhas potentially. It's a wild world we live in, man.
Anything's possible, but it's hard to keep it up. And look at the Pirates. I mean, they started out 20-8,
exactly,
and they had the best record in the game, and everyone's talking. I think up there with the Rays, and now they've lost 10 in a row. Run differential catches up with you. If you're just getting outscored on the season, it's hard to keep winning. If
you've got to be like extremely clutch, like say 2021 Mariners who missed the playoffs, but like they were close. And then if that does happen, then it might catch up to you the next year is what I've noticed, where it's like, all right, you're not going to be able to recreate that 2 years in a row. In a lot of sports, that's the case usually when you just keep winning all the close games or keep losing all the close games. The question is whether or not the Padres will regress to the mean this year, I think. And I don't know. They just have a lot of bad vibes to the team. Everyone wants Melvin fired. You have the situation on Monday when they either didn't throw Tim Hill in or they didn't throw Josh Hader in, and or the fact that they used Luis Garcia, who they used in yesterday's game, probably to just give him a good mental picture of what it looks like to get an out, because he's been struggling to do that. And that's what happened with the Giants game. It's really tough. I want to end on one thing, just for fun, because I think it was pretty funny. The Melvin ejection that occurred in Wednesday's game, in which Tatis, which again, big surprise for the one absent, aside from Blake Snell's pitching, one of the best developments for the team this year has been Tatis becoming an exceptional defensive outfielder, probably going to win the Gold Glove if he keeps this up, also because of his popularity and his overall skill. Throws out, I forgot who it was at home plate.
Blake Sable.
It was Blake Sable. And what's your perspective on this whole catch rule thing? My first thing was I was just a little comatose because I didn't care. In a way, because I was like, my team stinks. I'm not going to start getting upset at umpires now. Like, my takeaway was the rule seems to state if the throw beat him by that much, then it shouldn't be called. But like, I'm just kind of removed from this because my thing overall was like, I'm just sad. Like, my team's losing and I don't want to turn this into the classic content creator thing where I just blame the umps because, like, bro, like, score, you know what I mean? So like, what was your kind of perspective on that? Do you think the rule needs tinkering, or what do you think?
Yeah, so I've seen that part about if the throw beats the runner by a lot, that they can like just ignore a violation. I've seen that like reference, but I haven't actually seen that like documented officially in the rule book. What I have seen is the documented official rule about the illegality of what a catcher can do that would be a violation of, it's the home plate collision rule. And to me, Gary Sanchez clearly violated it. He had, I talked about this on my show today, but before the throw, like as the throw was coming in, he was in a legal position, but as the ball was getting closer to him, he started to position himself into the lane of the runner, and he did not yet have the baseball. And simply put, that is the rule. You cannot get in front of the lane of the runner, which is like basically Gabe Kapler, Giants manager, said after the game, the team's understanding of the rule is that the catcher cannot have any part of his body, like his foot, on the foul side of the line. And Gary Sanchez did. If you look at the replay, his left foot was on the foul side of the third base line before the ball arrived, and the throw didn't force him there. That's the thing, is you are allowed to do this if the throw forces you to do it, but Sanchez simply was starting to position his body in front of the plate, and it's ticky-tack, but like technically, like in New York, they're just trying to go by the letter of the law. And the part about if the throw clearly beat him, I haven't seen that. I need to see that, like the official terminology, and I'm willing to say that I take it back if I see that, but I haven't seen that. Like, I've seen it referenced, but I haven't actually seen it. Whereas I know that the other part of the rule, and it was not all that borderline, but it was. I mean, his foot was just kind of barely in the lane. But if you watch Blake Sable, he veered way out once Sanchez got in front of the plate, and he didn't have the ball yet, and that's a clear violation. And I know, like, it stinks if my team faced that, I would be unhappy, but the rule is the rule, and you just have to live with the rule.
Maybe this is just one of those cases, in my opinion. Just a little clarification might be needed. Maybe Major League Baseball needs to come out and be like, let's just tinker the language. Let's make sure it's a little bit more clear, or absolute that you can't block it in any form, or that it does matter if you whatever. I think they just need to make it a little bit more absolute, similar to, for all my football fans out there, when nobody knew what the heck a catch was in football for the longest time, and then they finally had to be very specific about what it meant. You don't have to hold the ball and carry it with you to dinner and have it not move out of your arms for like another half hour for it to be a catch. They clarified that. That's what I think is the case here. And again, I'm not really that upset. Tatis has been great defensively. No one's going to be upset. Like it's fine if he has one less outfield assist. So I was totally cool with that. And I think that this was not nearly, from my perspective, as egregious as the, what was it, Rangers White Sox, I think, where that one was like, I remember listening to Around the Horn at ESPN, and Mina Kimes had just brought up like, the guy didn't have to change his route of sliding. Like he didn't have to move his butt. It seems pretty obvious that there wasn't a block of the plate there. That one I felt like was a genuine bad, especially because it actually seems like it cost the game. While this was an early-ish thing for the Padres that just added on to a nightmare of stuff that had been already happening. So it was hard for me to get super upset about it and blame it entirely. So, hey, and people getting mad at Cap. What? This is a general thing in sports. Stop getting mad at people because they're trying to like bring up a rule that they know is going to, it's in the rule. Like, I don't understand why you would,
and it was successsul. You know, it's not like, oh, he tried to do something and it's not like he hit why would he even try it? He literally, you know, the Sanchez violated the rule, and that's why they challenged.
Yeah. So I'm totally cool with that. Regardless, again, clarification probably.
I think you're absolutely right. MLB could do a much better job. Like the players don't know. The manager, Bob Melvin, was beside himself. Like nobody knows what
beside himself either. So
and I saw the one the previous night. It's kind of crazy. It happened back-to-back nights, and I was with you. I was like, what? How is that a violation? And I think I figured it out talking to myself today on the show that I was doing, is because Jonah Heim, I think it was. No, he's the guy who it was Jonah Heim.
Yeah,
I think it was, and he was behind the plate. And so it's like, of course, the runner has a lane because how could you be blocking the plate if you're like behind it? And I think the idea is, what if the runner wanted to run straight through the plate? They're allowed, they don't have to slide. And so I'm kind of thinking the lane was blocked for him to run if he wanted to. And so
we need clarification. That's what it feels
like. We need clarification. Okay, so come on, Major League rule, Baseball. You just have to be off to the side. You've got to be in fair territory and do everything you can to stay in fair territory until you have the ball, and then you can do whatever you want. You can get in front of the guy. You can just stand there and block the plate, and you can have collisions. Like the runner can kind of blow you up if you get in front of the plate. We don't see it often
because of your guy. That's partially why this whole thing started, and I'm a big fan of it because I watch football for big hits. I do not watch baseball for big hits. In fact, I don't even watch football for that. But that's what it was very weird, and Buster Posey obviously being kind of the face of that back in the day. But yeah, I agree. I think we just need a clarification, and I think in general, stop getting mad at people for doing their job essentially in this case. And Gabe Kapler may very well again get himself a Manager of the Year. He already got it 2 years ago, but with how the Giants have been played, this is how this award usually goes. So maybe that's going to go his way. And just in general, again, PSA, stop getting mad at people for kind of doing what they should be doing. Like with, what's his name? With Boris, I've never understood why this guy, he gets guys overpaid. Okay, that's his job.
Great job.
Yeah, he does his job.
Literally his job.
I don't understand why people get mad. It's insane. But anyway, that's for another entire podcast. Ben, do you have any final words you want to give to the people and any things you want to plug?
Not really. I mean, just a lot of baseball season left. It's going by real fast for me. And so just for me, like trying to enjoy every day. I can't believe the All-Star break is almost here already. It's kind of gone by so fast. Yeah. But yeah, the NL West, I really truly believe, like I'm calling it for your listeners and for my own, that I think the Padres are going to be a factor as a, they're not cooked, I don't think. And, you look at the Braves, I think they had a 35-39 record in 2021, and which is the Padres had that record maybe right now or coming into today. And that Braves team went on to win the World Series. And so, And you know from last year, you just got to get into the
Exactly.
playoffs, and then you can, even if you're the underdog and in New York on the road, playing the Mets in a wild card series, you could still surprise people and make a run. So
Things happen in sports all the time that have never happened before. Last year, first National League, first championship series in general that featured 2 wildcard teams. Who the heck knows? This could be the first year when an 85-win Padres team wins the World Series. We don't know. I'm still sad. Ben is not. But regardless, we keep chugging along anyway. Ben, this has been a blast as always. Love doing our crossovers, man. Really good stuff. And for everybody else, remember, go follow both of us on YouTube, Locked On Padres, Locked On Giants, me at Javipeno, Javiipeno, and Ben at Ben Caspick. And until next time, stay safe and, of course, stay faithful, my Friar Faithful homies. And shouts to the San Francisco Bay folk. Take care.